Picture this. You are in St. Mark's Square, tossing a tiny croissant crumb to a cute little pigeon. Boom. A local officer taps your shoulder, and you have just bagged yourself a massive €500 fine. But wait, why did one of the most romantic cities on Earth declare ruthless war on birds? It is not just about keeping your fancy vacation shoes clean. It is actually about a silent, highly acidic biological invasion that is literally eating human history alive. Grab your gelato, because we are diving into the hidden, expensive laws of Venice. If you have ever traveled to Italy, or even just scrolled through travel feeds online, you know the classic Venetian aesthetic. Sun-drenched cobblestones, bustling little cafes, tourists happily eating giant scoops of gelato, and ancient architecture that looks like it was ripped straight out of a Renaissance painting. And of course, right in the middle of it all are the pigeons. Thousands of them. For decades, feeding these birds was the ultimate tourist cliché. You would buy a little bag of birdseed, hold out your hands, and let a chaotic, fluttering swarm of feathers land all over your arms for the perfect vacation photo. It felt like a completely innocent, magical Disney princess moment. But if you try that today, you are going to get intercepted by the local police. Those officers patrolling the square are not just looking for pickpockets. They are strictly enforcing a zero-tolerance policy against feeding the wildlife. For a long time, people assumed the locals were just annoyed by the overwhelming mess or the massive crowds of birds interrupting their peaceful afternoon espressos. But the truth is far more destructive, and the stakes are literally tied to the survival of the city. Here is the dirty little secret about pigeons. Their droppings are not just gross. They are essentially highly concentrated drops of corrosive acid. Pigeon guano contains heavy amounts of uric acid, which is an absolute nightmare for a city built entirely out of ancient limestone and delicate marble statues. So, what happens when acidic guano meets centuries-old calcium carbonate? A ruthless chemical reaction takes place. The acid literally dissolves the stone at a microscopic level, creating tiny craters and weakening the structural integrity of priceless historical facades. Every time a pigeon leaves a present on a cathedral, it is slowly melting away masterpieces that have survived for over a millennium. It is basically a slow-motion, highly destructive biological warfare against human history. By the early 2000s, Venice was drowning in a feathery crisis. The city was spending staggering amounts of money, exponential millions of euros every single year, just to aggressively scrape bird droppings off the basilicas, monuments, and bridges before the acid could eat completely through the delicate architectural details. The city was facing financial ruin just from cleaning up after tourists feeding the birds. The situation became so scientifically and financially critical that the local government had to pull the plug. In 2008, Venice passed strict, sweeping legislation that officially banned the feeding of pigeons anywhere in the city. The iconic birdseed vendors were kicked out of St. Mark's Square forever. They legally classified feeding pigeons as an act of vandalism against a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it was not just the chemical acid attacks. Pigeons also peck at the soft mortar between the bricks of these ancient buildings, looking for small bits of grit to help digest their food. Plus, their nests naturally block gutters and ancient drainage pipes. When the heavy Italian rains inevitably come, that trapped water causes severe internal flooding and structural rot deep inside the cathedral walls. These harmless-looking birds were unintentionally dismantling Venice, brick by ancient brick. This zero-tolerance policy in St. Mark's Square is not just some isolated, quirky Italian law to ruin your vacation vibe. It represents a massive, global shift in how we have to fiercely protect our most fragile historic environments. Venice is on the front lines of a desperate, wide-scale defense to prevent irreplaceable human history from literally dissolving into dust. It forces us to ask, how much damage do our innocent daily habits cause? Across the world, from the Acropolis in Athens to the ancient temples in India, conservationists are battling the exact same biological threats. When millions of tourists gather to feed local wildlife, it artificially inflates animal populations to unnatural, unsustainable levels. This completely disrupts local ecosystems, and turns a minor architectural nuisance into a catastrophic, multi-million euro preservation nightmare. By banning the breadcrumbs, Venice actually saved its own breathtaking skyline for future generations to admire. So, while it might seem incredibly harsh to slap a giant €500 fine on a smiling tourist holding a piece of pastry, you have to look at the bigger picture. We want these magical, ancient cities to stand tall, proud, and beautifully intact long after our vacation is over. Next time you are walking through a historic plaza anywhere in the world, keep your snacks safely in your pockets, because sometimes the best way to love a historic city is to just let the pigeons find their own lunch.